And they got his mobile phone, and they were aware of the fact that whatever he did, he always had his mobile phone with him. So when he spoke to anybody, even if it was he always had his mobile phone there. And they played around with the computer bit in the mobile phone, so that they could listen to anything he said while he was near his own mobile phone. Okay, they convicted him on the basis of it. The amount of intrusion is quite extensive and extremely detailed. And as I said, well, a good example of the United Kingdom being ahead of everybody else. In the United Kingdom, your DNA is taken from you if you're arrested. Yeah? Now it's quite possible that you're arrested and you're totally innocent. So even if you are acquitted or never prosecuted, or even if it is absolutely manifestly clear that you are the wrong person, they will keep your DNA on record. In fact, a senior judge just a couple of weeks ago said they should have everybody's DNA on record. Every resident in the United Kingdom should be demanded to be asked to give his DNA. It's a biometric. Yeah? We're already going to be asked, all of us in Europe, for an iris scan, and of course you have facial recognition, a digital picture of your face already in identity cards and passports in Europe. In the United Kingdom, as a result of this, they have more than 100,000 DNA samples of children, that's people under 18, who have no conviction for any crime whatsoever. And that is growing by the day. Here's Tony Blair giving his own sample, and he says it was marvelous and everybody's DNA should be on file. The database state, which is the surveillance state, is already there. If you have the powers to connect the dots, if you have access to the different databases, the people that record your tax information, your social security information, your private banking data, your travel data, your medical data, if you connect all that up, and what you do at the supermarket and at the underground, and what phone calls you make, where you make your phone calls, what internet websites you browse, if you connect all that up, you literally are naked. There is nothing that whoever has access to the combination of that data doesn't know about you. This is why I was talking about the naked citizen, and I'm going to explain in a minute why I talk about the naked European citizen, because there's this European impetus behind it. That is a serious threat to not just to privacy. I wish people wouldn't talk about privacy. Data protection is an awkward term. Privacy is a wrong term as well. It's not just that you don't want people to pry into your life, to look at you while you're in the shower. That is privacy interference. That's more than that. In the information society, information is power. He or it, who or that, has information on you, has power over you. Your bank decides to give you credit on the basis of their credit score. I'll come to scores in a minute. Yeah? You might be selected for an interview for the next job you apply to on the basis of some kind of analysis of the data without any interview taking place. More and more you are being dealt with on the basis of what's called your digital shadow. And your digital shadow can be highly misleading. That's the next thing I wanted to mention. Let me go a little bit forward in it. And I'll come back to it at the European level, but I should perhaps already mention it. And that is that these data are not just taken at face value, but they're increasingly being analyzed to create profiles, to create scores. And it's not in particular in the anti-terrorist field, but it's being extended into other fields, like surveillance of children, surveillance of criminals, suspected criminals, and everybody else. So let me first go to this is the first trend. The first trend is a massive explosion in the amount of data that's being generated, either by direct surveillance or by this data surveillance, yeah? Surveillance over the databases that hold data on you. there is a quality jump, if you like, a quality jump when it comes to the analysis of the data, and I'll come back to that later. Now, first trend is massive increase in surveillance generally, either direct or through the data trails that you leave behind. Now we come to another trend that you can spot in the United Kingdom, but I can also spot it in the rest of Europe. That's called bringing protection forward, and I'm quoting somebody I used to know very well before the poor man died, but Studium, Kapeller, and he wrote a book, De Voorverlegde Staatsschutz, which in itself is a quote from the 1930s. And it is the idea that if there is a serious threat, in those days this is a political threat to the essence of the state, security of the state, then it wasn't good enough to just go and stop the criminals or the terrorists or the enemies of the state when they were actually in the process of throwing bombs. You had to bring your protection forward, and you had to stop them while they were still only thinking about perpetrating those crimes. The same is happening in the anti-terrorist field now, but in fact it is a wider trend. And I wrote a big study with my friends from the Foundation for Information Policy Research on surveillance of children in the United Kingdom. It's called Children's Databases, and you can get it from the Information Commissioner's Office in the United Kingdom. It's downloaded. And it starts with good intentions, like all steps on the way to hell, as it usually says. And I think it's very illustrative to come up with the example from the non-terrorist field, the non-criminal justice field, because I think whenever we talk about measures in the anti-terrorist field, people think that will never affect me. Right? Now let's talk about the other one. This is about, in the United Kingdom, a typical Labour government idea. They see that some children are failing. They are falling through the net. They don't achieve their proper potential. Yeah? And if you do analysis, of course government does analysis, academics do analysis, you find a number of factors that are associated with doing very badly at school, or getting ill, or dying young, or becoming a drug addict, or whatever. Yeah? And so what does a government do? For very good purposes. It says, why don't we try and identify children that are likely to go astray? Yeah. And try and deal with them, I'll come back to what dealing with the child means later on, as early as possible so that they are going to grow up to reach their full potential. What it means, if you really want to do that, is they say we need to have the information, we need to be able to select these children from the general population so we can target our resources and help them to achieve their full potential. Now, there has always been a very highly developed surveillance mechanism on children in the United Kingdom, just as it is in the Netherlands. And this is to protect children against abuse, sexual or physical abuse, direct kindermishandeling, yeah? Direct maltreatment of children. If a child is ill-treated, or if there's a serious, real, factual suspicion that the child is either physically or sexually, or even psychologically seriously abused, usually by his parents, then all kind of limitations that normally apply go out of the window, quite rightly so. A doctor not only has the right, but has the duty to report such a case to the social services. Yeah? And possibly to the police. There are different sort of steps that are defined differently in different legal systems, but in order to protect a child against physical or sexual abuse, quite rightly, data protection goes out of the window. The social worker will talk to the doctor will talk to the youth justice, guidance person, or whatever they're called, and they will work together with, but it needs to be also against, the parents to prosecute them. And that is quite right in the area of child abuse. What's happening in the United Kingdom is that they're bringing this forward, that they're extending this principle to saying we must basically do the same every time we think a child is at risk of failing the government target, at risk of not getting a good enough diploma, at risk of not eating enough vegetables. It sounds funny, but it's true. Yeah? In order to do this, they now demand that all the data goes to the center. So schools that used to report only aggregate numbers, statistical numbers, how many children would pass particular exams, are now required to report detailed figures on all children. Yeah? Then they used to have a careers guidance officer in schools. You know, if you're all very young, so you can all still remember when you're about 14, 15, 16 at school, there is somebody who comes to you and says, now, what do you want to become? You say, well, I want to become a lawyer, well, that's what you've got to do, maybe you should take these kind of options at school. And they can help you along. That was privatized. And one of the consequences of privatization, once something becomes a profit-making entity, is that they look for more fields in which to expand. Well, they said we can expand into this new field of monitoring children. They're called connections, and I think they're really, although they themselves don't see themselves as evil, they themselves see them only as helping the children along. Yeah? I think they've got quite a dangerous role that they've given themselves. They collect all these data, and they will advise children on what they can do, but they will also diagnose. That's a diagnostic form that you really have to look at in great detail to see how ghastly it is. And they will see if there are danger signs. Is this child perhaps in need of psychological counseling? Yeah? Is this child in need of some kind of medical test? Should we get in touch with the police? What they do is they sit down with the child, and it is still a child, even if you're 16 and 17, you think you're quite old, but if you sit down with an adult at school, in a school context, and they're asking you a lot of questions, they will ask, do you use drugs? And that includes a few puffs on a hash cigarette. Does your brother or your sister, your friends, are you involved in sexual activity? It's not illegal to be involved in sexual activity, but they still write it down on the form. And the form goes to the central office and is shared with the social services. These are the kind of questions. Are the parents suitable parents? Do they set the right targets for the child? That is a dangerous kind of thing to ask. What is the right child? If you tell your child it doesn't matter if you don't become a lawyer, you can be just as happy being a pop musician. Are you an inadequate parent? Is the child inadequate for not wanting to become a lawyer or wanting to become a pop musician? It's very bad and dangerous. These are quite different kind of questions than the ones you ask if you want to find out if a child is being abused. And using the one system to target the other kind of issue is quite dangerous. We've described it in great detail in this report. I've given Hildegard a copy, so I'm sure if you want to go, you can go and have it, but you can also get it online. Children's databases. They basically have put in place a comprehensive system of surveillance over under 18-year-olds in the United Kingdom. These things always creep. Yeah? The next group that they're extending it to is the elderly. Elderly are also these vulnerable groups that we've got to go and look after, so we've got to go and get all the data in the world on them. Yeah? People from ethnic minorities who already feel targeted in all kind of other not very friendly ways. So this surveillance culture, this bringing forward the attention of the state, is happening not just in these special fields of criminal justice and terrorism. It's happening much wider than that. And I really think you should be aware of it, because the same is happening, although I'm not where I don't know so much about it. I think similar things are happening in the Netherlands. I know that there are all kinds of programs for data sharing between different agencies. There are dangers involved in that. In Germany, I wrote two big appendices to this report, one on Germany, one on France. In Germany, there is actually a prohibition in passing on information other than actual marks from preschool, kindergartners, as they name it, to the first primary school, because they say it would label a child if you gave too much information from one to the other. And that's exactly what's happening in the United Kingdom. If you get sent from one school to another school, with a label around your neck saying failure, likely to become a criminal, you are extremely likely to be stopped by the police.